Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Brock here. Brock, you've been behind so many incredible companies and been such a pioneer in the crypto space. I think that the work that you've done has really changed the space and has helped make it something that has enabled so many people to be interested in crypto and interested in ways that has a lot of value to them. Whether that's through what you did with Block One, how you had an ICO that was like the biggest ICO at the time that attracted so much investor interest and people even outside the space to get into the space. What you did with Tether and helping people have something that's a real world, has a lot of real world value associated with it to use it, but in a crypto manner. I'm just excited to have you here and to get into your story. So thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, so for me, the journey of life began at the age of 3. I mean, obviously birth, but I got my first job when I was 3. I started acting, and I grew up making commercials as a child. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, the Twin Cities, where Kellogg, Sears, Target, General Mills, 3M, all Best Buy, all of these companies came from. And when I was a child, they would only make things locally. And that Twin City accent played well with all of America. So I grew up playing Mario in commercials and, call it an underwear model, not Calvin Klein, Fruit of the Loom, and all that sort of stuff. But I was also a kid from Minnesota and I played hockey. And so when Disney came to town to film Mighty Ducks, I booked a role playing young Gordon Bombay, opening up the movie. That led to making a few other movies, coming out to California to shoot Mighty Ducks 2, sticking around, making a bunch more movies. And then once I got to the point that I was starring in films like First Kid, where I played the son of the president of the United States of America with Sinbad and Bill Clinton and Sonny Bono, I just didn't feel like this is what I wanted to be doing in life. I didn't really choose to do it. I just grew up doing it, and arguably somewhat successfully. But I decided I wanted to be more of an entrepreneur. And at the time, that was really thinking about film production. But then watching what was going on with the internet at the time, and this is 1996, the internet sort of 1.0, wave one of all of this started happening at that time. And I said, well, the internet's going to disrupt the media business. The internet's going to change the way that content is distributed, how many channels, there's effectively infinite ones, user-generated content, all this sort of stuff. And at 16, co-founded the first streaming video company, the kind of precursor to YouTube, Netflix, and Hulu. Raised $88 million from Microsoft, NBC, Chase Lazard, David Geffen, Terry Semel, all the folks to build the first sort of streaming media business in 1997. And so I was the youngest internet entrepreneur at the time. And broadband didn't roll out at the rate that everybody had forecast. And so in the spring of 2000, when the bear market hit, everything imploded worse than anything we've ever seen in crypto. And, at that point, I'm like, wow, I'm a washed up actor, failed entrepreneur, college dropout. What am I going to do with my life? Well, pick yourself up and do it again. And so I left this reality and I moved to the metaverse. And I then began spending all my time living in virtual reality and ended up becoming the main market maker in the world for virtual currencies in your EverQuest, your World of Warcrafts, your Second Lives, your Lineages, your all of those sort of virtual worlds. And so I became the primary market maker across thousands of metaverses or virtual worlds, countries, if you will, and became PayPal's largest merchant, Google's largest advertiser for a little while, instrumental in the launch of Alipay in China, had about 400,000 people working in the metaverse to mine digital currency, primarily in China, built the first television channel in China controlled by a foreigner, which was to bring esports into that market in 2004, 2005, rolled up most of the media business, and a company called Zam, which I sold to Tencent, which was a top 100 web property. It's where if you played World of Warcraft, you went to Wowhead or Thoughtbot or Alakazam, all of our websites to get information to be able to actually run around and complete quests and have profiles for your character. And so naturally, as the main person running the virtual currency markets around games and metaverses for 10 years, it was inevitable that I would end up in Bitcoin.
So you got into cryptocurrency. You mentioned kind of some of the virtual world stuff that you were doing before. What did you think, like initially, what were you thinking you were going to do in cryptocurrency? Did you think you were going to start building businesses? And when did you decide that how did you come up with your ideas that you wanted to build in the space?
Well, I mean, we had in South Korea alone 98% market share with 40% of the population of the country as our customers buying and selling virtual currencies. So for me, we were tenuring professors at universities because we were able to test economic theories in game worlds that economists in the real world couldn't do. So if you were really a forward thinking economist, you would normally come and spend time with us to think about how to build alternative financial systems. And so, for me, this was an opportunity to see if we could take what we've built in the virtual world and bring it into, call it the analog world, where, the brick and pixel meets, where the analog meets digital. And so for Bitcoin, initially I wanted to be very anonymous. I was, nervous about what, government reaction might be to it. And I spent a long period of time deciding whether or not I want to go actively build things and be visible, knowing that it could cost me my life or my liberty. And that took a while to get over that hump. But eventually it's like, you know what your life's purpose is. And you're like, I'm not going to sit on the sidelines knowing this is what I'm here to do. And so it took until about 2012 for me to start making, formal open steps into the space. By 2013, I had dropped every other business I was running to work exclusively in the space. Like most people, it starts with mining. In the mining area of the space, we own 10% of the batch one Avalons, which was the first ASIC. And this is when Bitcoin mining had gone from GPUs to ASICs. And I think probably the largest Bitcoin miner there for a moment. And started launching new companies every 45 to 90 days. And a handful of them that you've mentioned obviously ended up being very successful. And it became, with my partners, the largest investor or token contributor to the Mastercoin ICO, which was the first ICO back in the summer of 2013. And we were building the layer 2 on top of Bitcoin. You had counterparty and colored coins at the time. We were the first ones to tokenize that. Co-founded Blockchain Capital with my partner's partner, Brad Stevens. We were the first venture fund in the space. They're now on Fund 6. We're one of the most successful firms of all time in terms of returns. Tether in the building the first successful stablecoin. Actually, Dan Larimer at BitShares with BitUSD with an algorithmic stablecoin was first, to be fair. Started the first crypto bank down here in Puerto Rico. Created the first security token with BCAP. Wax and Block V were the first 2 NFT platforms that basically came out of my living room. Block One, there's tons of things. Bankcore, great friends, was very involved in helping them launch the first liquidity pool and the first DeFi systems. And I've done a lot of stuff. Got involved in the foundation, chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation. So a lot of advocacy, a lot of evangelism, a lot of education. Well, I wouldn't give myself any credit for causing the adoption to happen. I was actually a little bit skeptical, having gone around and talked to governments and having run for president of the United States, that it was going to happen in a way that makes sense. Most of the governments at the time were just doing really basic pilots that I would not call game changing. What President Bukele did and what El Salvador did was brave, bold, and courageous. And the future favors the bold. And so when he came to my partner David Bailey's Bitcoin conference to make the announcement that they've actually done this, I was taken aback that this is happening to this degree. This is phenomenal. That someone has this level of vision. And I've spent time with a lot of people having similar conversations leading up to that. But what I did is the ambassador of El Salvador to the United States came to my place in DC, the Pierce School, and we were having a conversation about the implementation of the law and the fact that it was scheduled to happen in 90 days. So I organized the first delegation into the country since COVID, the first formal delegation, brought 35 other key industry participants and players down to introduce the government and the ministries to everybody and multiple versions of each that they would need to be able to launch the law successfully, which is what we did. And I did that within a week of the event occurring.
How are you helpful to El Salvador adopting Bitcoin? How impactful has it been to El Salvador to have Bitcoin as something that's a form of major currency within the country?
Well, it's been very impactful. I'll give you just some of the data. Prior to the Bitcoin law, 30% of the population was what you'd call banked or had financial services. 70% of the population was unbanked. So from a financial inclusion perspective, within 12 months of the law being implemented, because the government did incentivize it, they were giving out free Bitcoin. They were able to have 70% of the population with access to financial services, some form of financial services, to be banked to some degree. And so that impact was there. Obviously, it still takes time to change human behavior and to become a consistent habit of how to go about doing things. But that's a huge thing. Another one is it took President Bukele from being a head of state and made him into a world leader, right? It changed his profile, not just that, but stopping MS-13 and a number of other things that he's done. It's not solely because of this action, but you had a leader, a real visionary that had the courage to be brave, to be bold, and to make an impact, which he's done, in a massive way in El Salvador. And it's also brought economic development. It's attracted innovation. It's attracted investment into energy infrastructure, and a bunch of things that are, I think, have proven to be impactful. Naysayers, haters are always going to hate, and they're going to say too little, not enough. But the reality is, it's very material, the impact that it's had already, and it's just the beginning.
Why do you think that your creation of mastercoin helped make this big ICO boom? It was really credited with creating this boom that so many people were able to raise money from. Why do you think that this happened?
Well, again, not my creation. It was I played my part. Teamwork makes the dream work. At the time, we did not perceive it for what it could be. I also did. I was an advisor to Distilled Genes. DNAX is the public ticker, but we were the second Reg A offering in the United States. I was also, a venture capitalist and an angel investor, and so I built up two of the top 10 syndicates on Angel List at the time, and so I was very interested in capital formation. Having grown up in the venture markets, both as an entrepreneur as well as on the capital deployment side. And if you are an innovator with an idea, if you were a change maker, the likelihood of you ever being able to impact the world really depended upon where you live. You needed to be in California. You needed to be in Washington State. You needed to be, in the Northeast, New York, Boston, et cetera, and to a lesser extent, the rest of the world, and only major cities, and only a handful of them. The Jobs Act was changing things so that, people in America could have access effectively to retail like small investors without all the complications that regulation have created. And so for us at the time, we were really believers in what could be built on top of Bitcoin. And it took about 10 years before Bitcoin has come to, call it, consensus was reached about building on top of Bitcoin and scaling Bitcoin. But our view was we were big believers in the idea that, call it, Bitcoin was the TCP/IP layer, and that mastercoin, Omni, and colored coins could be the HTTP layer, and that we could build further decentralized applications, a decentralized world on top of Bitcoin's incredible infrastructure. And so when that sale happened, it received about $600,000 worth of Bitcoin. None of us had a belief that we would, any confidence that we would get a return. This is the first time anyone's done anything. So, and it was a fair launch. Those that were on the project's development got zero, got nothing. The only way to get Mastercoin, now Omni tokens, was in the sale. No matter what your role was, everybody was treated equally. It was a completely fair launch. The team got nothing. There was no foundation of anything. And so this was the first social experiment to see, would people contribute their Bitcoin at the time, or tokens, to an idea they believed in. Obviously, that led to financial returns, and that caused the market to become explosive. We didn't call it an ICO at the time. The terminology sometimes comes after the fact. The idea was this is a way to build the bridges, the roads, and the tunnels, the critical infrastructure necessary for Bitcoin to flourish. And one of the problems I was having at the time is I was going to, and I'm not going to name any names, but I was going to large Bitcoin holders and saying, hey, will you help fund this? Will you help fund that? These are the things that need to be built for Bitcoin to really work. This is the stuff we're going to need. And the response I got from almost every whale that came from my background, a sophisticated angel or venture capitalist or even, founder, from Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, wherever. The standard response I got from everyone is, no, I believe it's a better investment just to hold my Bitcoin and ride on everybody else's coattails. I'm like, the problem is if everybody does that, none of the things that we need will ever get built. It requires those making sacrifice and actually reinvesting in the ecosystem's development if we want an ecosystem that will thrive. And I was really frustrated by the fact that almost every whale was like not interested in helping build the industry. Part of it was, I don't want anyone to know that I'm a holder. I need to keep my anonymity. Anything I do, could put my life in jeopardy. So there were some legitimate reasons why people were also very reluctant. It wasn't just it's a better investment to let everybody else pay for the work, but because there were other variables to take into consideration. But that's where another reason why this looked important. The industry needed to find a way to get the resources necessary to develop it itself. And it wasn't coming through the methods that normally would have been employed, which is find angels, find venture capitalists. There wasn't enough of this. There didn't exist yet. You had angels only, and the angels weren't feeling angelic. And the VC market didn't exist yet. And if you talk to traditional VCs, they wouldn't touch this industry with a 10-foot pole. And so the only way for this to have worked is you had to create a funding mechanism that would allow the industry to fund its own development by, those that are true believers.
What inspired you to want to create Tether, a stablecoin that was pegged to the dollar? Why did you see the need for it?
Well, it was obvious to me that this was needed. So again, BitShares, Dan Larimer, who was co-founder of Block One and EOS and Steemit, Dan had built BitShares and he had BitUSD. BitUSD, my partners and I were the largest holders. And what we discovered pretty quickly is we could break the buck. We could break the algorithmic stablecoin like a Terra Luna. Now, at greater scale, it gets harder and harder, but it was very obvious you could do that. And so then I was thinking about the concept of an asset-backed instrument. What if we just allowed people like an American Express, traveler's check or like a cashier's check? What if we could take dollars in and give you a digital, basically traveler's check, a token, a tether, and that would allow you to go in out of the Bitcoin market, long, short, right, into dollars, back into Bitcoin, back into dollars, to be able to move your dollars from one exchange to another without having to wire the money back into the banking system. You needed a native instrument to be able to move dollars around for anyone that trades and for anyone that wants to be able to move from exchange to exchange, as well as most of the world was not interested in Bitcoin. Everybody in the world wanted dollars. And so if financial inclusion and helping the world that, is, in a position to leapfrog, if that market had a way to get access to a digital dollar with ease, through a Bitcoin wallet where every time they got their dollar, they could see that they can get Bitcoin, it seemed like also a really powerful way to educate the markets. And when I was telling everybody about the idea, 99% of everyone said it's a terrible idea. We don't like dollars because this is early Bitcoin. It was a little bit of a different market. And but we went ahead and built it anyway. I grabbed Craig Sellers, who was the CTO of Mastercoin with me. It was built initially on Mastercoin, but changed its name to Omni. I brought in my old buddy Reeve Collins to be CEO. And then we put our two projects together with the principals of Bitfinex, and it became a joint venture to create Tether.
Why did you decide to run for president as an independent candidate? What did you learn most from that experience? Because sometimes politics can have an effect on your life.
Well, you keep looking at systems, right? Let's take a look at what is, Bitcoin, all about? It's about innovation in our financial system, right? The digitization of our financial system, bringing transparency to our financial system. It's the way of our continual upgrading. And one of the things that you'll get deeply into as you really immerse yourself in this industry is the governance of it all. Our governance system, that thing which governs our world, our governments, is another core area. I mean, what are these things at their core? You view them as financial systems. They're systems of governance. And so at some point, we want the old and the new to win together. We don't want old versus new. We want eventually people, it's human nature to fear that which they don't understand. And you conquer or overcome fear with knowledge. And so in that process of running, the question is, can we move beyond a two-party system of red and blue being our only choices? Can we deliver a powerful message of innovation, which the future should never be partisan? And what is the pathway of upgrading our governance at a time where I think, we've got plenty of room to improve? And so I made the decision to go make that a critical aspect of my 40s. Basically, my life operates in decades, and my 40s was really about, our world's governance. But naturally, as an American, it started at home. I mean, I went from there to being very involved in New York city elections, then the midterms, to roles in the United Nations and advising governments around the world, having my own organization, advising heads of state around the world. I'm very involved in politics. I'm I'm very involved. So it's not, that was just basically the way to start. Which, by the way, I normally would not advise people as their first move into politics to go run for the highest, most dangerous office. Remember, the moment you step into the ultimate arena, which is the presidential race in the United States, you're asking for everybody, every media organization, every agency to come do a very thorough investigation of your life. So, not something I would advise, and I think most of us that are paying attention understand the consequences of messing around in that arena.
What do you aspire to accomplish now at this point? What are some of your short-term and long-term goals over the next 5 to 10 years? You've already done a lot within crypto and within other areas, and you've been impactful and done a lot of good for the world, but what do you want to do now?
Well, I'll just tell you briefly about a few of the other things I work on. I actually have to jump off this call in a moment to jump into a board call because I do airports, spaceports, marine ports. And so I'm in the infrastructure business. I also got into the healthcare business by buying a bankrupt hospital and nursing homes and building health insurance. And so what I do is I learn by doing things. And so I, will go buy a hospital to understand our problems with our healthcare system. I'll start buying nursing homes to understand how we can better take care of our elderly. And so if you want to change the future, you first have to understand the past. How did we get to the present where we are? Thoroughly understand the problems, not having the arrogance to just say, hey, I'm going to go fix it. You first have to go pay tuition and do the work to thoroughly understand the problems so that you have a seat at the table and you can actually be part of the conversation as to how we make it better. And so I've got my hands in many things, as and paying in blood, sweat, and tears to understand how to build a better world for the generations that follow.
Thanks for coming on, Brock. You've done so much already in the cryptocurrency space, and you've been really impactful building out the infrastructure there for many people, done a lot of good, and through other things that you've done too, like you mentioned before. I'm just excited to see the impact that you're going to have later on and your continued success. So appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you for having me.